Great. Without further ado, we'll begin. So good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all members of the Radley community and to any of our school partners who are joining us today on Zoom. My name's Caroline Monaghan and I'm looking after the Beyond Radley Career Speaker Programme, a series of talks designed to give you a live insight into the world of work and to help you explore the range of careers that are out there. This is the 5th talk we've held and we've had some great feedback so far, but we want to hear more from you. So please do email me if there's any specific careers or skills that you want to hear more about. All of our talks are recorded, so if you're interested in watching the videos, they're on the Radley video area of our website. I'm going to shortly hand you over to Doug Carr, our speaker, but before we begin, just a quick reminder of a few things. Please keep your microphones on mute throughout. If you want to ask a question, you can do so through the chat, and then there will be a Q&A at the end through the chat as well. The event will be recorded so we can share it with those who are unable to attend today. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to old Radleyan Doug Carr. After university, Doug spent 15 years in the city. He then decided to leave at the age of 38 to help grow his wife's business, Melly Mellow, a luxury handbag brand. Despite substantial growth, the profits weren't there, and Doug has since returned to the city whilst continuing to be an entrepreneur by night. He's going to tell you about his journey, what he learned along the way, and will give you his views on the traits and qualities you need to become a successful entrepreneur. Doug, over to you.
Thank you, Caroline. Afternoon, everybody. I hear you're all working from home. If there's any consolation, I'm working remotely as well for a long time. I actually got the current job that I landed today remotely. But I'll talk you through that and get cracking with the presentation. Look forward to lots of questions. If you're too shy to come out and set, and just please get on the chat room and ask in the chat room, and hopefully Caroline can pick them up from there. So let's go to the slides. Are you showing the slides, Caroline? Thanks. So let's go to the following slide. So the first thing to say that is, for me, it's all about passion. Like whatever you put into life, you get out, and the same really goes for whatever career you choose or whatever job you go down. So I love this quote: "There is no passion to be found playing small and settling for a life that is less than the one you're capable of living," by Nelson Mandela. So really give whatever you're going to do in your life 100%, and you'll get everything back in spades. Is my first slide. Next one. So before all began, a bit about myself. I started out life at Horace Hill Prep School, renamed by myself as Horrid Hill. I went to Radley in 89 to 94, which makes me feel like I'm very old and smelly by now, but it feels like yesterday I was there with you all. During my time at Radley, I actually did some interning in different careers to kind of check out what I wanted to do. I went and tried being a stockbroker. I went and tried a bit at the racing circuit, and then I tried a bit in Lloyd's. And then I went off on a gap year, went to Pakistan and India. I don't think I would let my 18-year-old son go to Pakistan, but somehow my parents sent me off to Lahore for 6 months to teach in a school in the middle of nowhere. And then went up to China, Afghanistan. We had a wonderful time in India. And then I landed back at Oxford Brookes University and did languages for business there, French and German with business. And then from there, I was very lucky. I applied for 20, 30 roles, but the internship that I did in Lloyd's served me well. And if we then turn to the next slide, we start the first chapter of my career, where I started at Miller's, which was an insurance broker. And I did 10 years there. I think in hindsight, probably 5 years too long. And this will become clear as you go through the presentation why I feel that. But I was fortunate enough with that loyalty that I gave to Miller's that they paid for an MBA in the States, and I had a year out. And we traveled the world from Arizona to Czech Republic to China and Singapore. And they moved the campus with us on this amazing year out from the city, which was all paid for. So it felt like quite a hoot and a blast. I then landed back and was poached by another firm called Aspen, an underwriting firm, again in Lloyd's. And I did another 5 years there. And then, as Caroline mentioned, at the age of 38, I got a bit bored and itchy feet, and I looked around and I felt like all the senior CEOs and execs were very grey and very old, and I was only 38, and how was I ever going to get to the top? So I decided it was a good time to take a break after 15 years or so in the city, and I started the chapter 2. And chapter 2 is where I looked at my wife, who comes from a family of entrepreneurs. Her father's an entrepreneur. He built a hotel in the 60s on an island off the coast of Sicily. Her 2 brothers are entrepreneurs. One is a restaurateur and one is a he runs an app called On the Life. And my family, none of my family entrepreneurs, it's not in my blood, but the MBA gave me this feeling that I wanted to go and run my own business. And where better to go from the city into the world of handbags. My father is ex-army, and actually he came to the talk I gave at Radley 5 years ago. And I think he still turns in his bed at night concerned that I left a very well-paid job in the city and decided to go and peddle handbags around the world with my wife. And he still kind of chuckles at me as to why that was a good decision. Next slide, please. So Melly Mellow was a brand that my wife founded, and I came along as the co-founder and helped her out. She'd been going along for 5 years on her own. It's all about Italian craftsmanship meets London contemporary cool. We manufacture in Italy, 400 to 600 pound handbags. And we were the next one behind Mulberry, independent, which means with my wife and I on our own. And when I joined, I had thought I'd learned quite enough from the city that I could apply to the world of handbags. And so we opened up, on the next slide, retail stores around the world. The pop-up you see in Regent Street there was actually a Radleyan who came to do an internship with me. And I said to him, right, your job is to do 3 months. I want you to open up our store on Regent Street. And he looked at me in complete horror. And he was basically the full project manager responsible for opening that store end to end, on time, on budget. And he was 17 years old. I think in his upper sixth year at Radley, and he smashed it and he did it. And he did a really, really good job with that. So again, it just shows Radleyans, you give them something, they tend to be a trusted pair of hands to deliver. We had a store on Portobello Road, and then we had 4 stores in Taipei, a store in Sydney Airport. And so in all 8 retail stores around the world. We built up a business very, very quickly. On the next slide, yeah. From £500,000 when I joined to 5.5 million very, very quickly in 4 years, with a small amount of venture capital money, which we raised for £150,000. We went a very long way. Now, those of you who've got a sharp eye, they'll notice 2 things here. One, there's something called gross margin, GM. And there's a line along the top that bumps along around kind of 51, 48, 46, 45. So my first trick to all of you is when you're setting up your own business, make sure you've got a very high gross margin number. And when I say very high, the sweet spot for me now is 90%, having been through this and around 50s. Because when you're below 50 here, you never quite really make enough money. And you can see what's called the EBITDA line. That's the profit line of the business. And you can see it sort of bumping along, never quite really going for profit. And I thought that was all fine and good because I believed that I could become like a tech entrepreneur. I could grow this thing and scale it and become the next Michael Kors. And I got very big for my boots and very excited. What I didn't appreciate was what was around the corner. We had 65 wholesale stores around the world, from Bloomingdale's. We had Korea. We had 25 staff here in London. And around the corner was 2 things happening: a very fast move from retail to digital, and with that kind of closing out of wholesale, cheaper and cheaper handbag brands coming up through around the corner. And so we very quickly realized we were in a very difficult position because we had no money. We hadn't fundraised. We'd been to see venture capital and private equity, and we'd had 4 offers on the table, but my wife and I could never quite agree, and the investors could never quite agree as to whether this was a good idea to take £3 million on board in the business and become a real slave to somebody else, or just to keep it us on ourselves and see how far we could go. So what happened next on those numbers is actually it reversed down the next 3 years as fast as it went up, which then led me to think, Christ, what do I do now? Because we've basically got no money, we're not making profits, we've got 25 people, 8 retail stores. And so I basically had to take a hatchet and a hammer and just knock the whole thing down that we'd built over the last 5 years and take it back down to 0. This led us to then think about, well, what do we do next? And so, what's quite interesting as an entrepreneur, if you work with another person, it doesn't have to be your wife, because not many people can work with their wife. I think I'm one of the lucky few who probably can. Everyone thinks I'm absolutely mad. How on earth do you do that? It would last 5 minutes, most people. But we have an interesting relationship where it really works well. She's a very creative visual, and I'm a sort of a data-driven numbers person. So she and I came up with this idea of headbands, and she saw this trend happening, and we launched Born in the Sun, which is a headband brand, in 2019. We launched the next brand, Smell the Cactus, in 2020, which is a jewelry brand. And then this year, we just launched in October of last year, a dog brand called The Doggy. So what we've taken is these learnings from fashion and from retail and from e-com and from wholesale to say, okay, if we could do it all again, what would we do? Number one, no investors. Number two, fully funded by ourselves from day one and profitable from day one. And number three, high margin business. So all of those of you who think that you have to go out and fundraise day one, you don't. All of those of you who think you need money to start a business, you don't. You just need the passion and the grit and the idea to see it through from nothing and follow it through until it becomes something. The next slide, please. So this is Born in the Sun. It's headbands, it's fashion, it's affordable. The handbags we were selling were £400, £500. These are £40, £50, £25. So the propensity to buy is much, much higher, and the volume is much, much bigger, and it turns very, very quickly. So we don't have the same issues we have with handbags, with lots of stock sitting around in a warehouse. It's very quick and it's very dynamic. The next slide. Smell the Cactus is jewelry, it's fashion jewelry, again, £25 to £50. Easy to store, it's very small, high margin, it moves very quickly. Again, trying to take the lessons we learned from the handbags and say, well, what can we do next that's more affordable, much quicker, and much faster, and apply the same learnings that we built on the way up. Next slide. And the doggy, I think in lockdown, we got a puppy, and I'm sure many of you out there got a puppy in your families, and it was a great thing to have in lockdown because we had the time, the patience to look after it. So we launched this dog accessories brand because we thought, actually, you know what, rather than why don't we go out and manufacture and design what we want for our dog and sell it on e-commerce? It's a huge market. It's growing very quickly. There's only a few big players in the UK like Pets at Home, and they're doing, I think, $2.5 billion of revenue. So why can't we have a little slice of that? If we can get 1% of Pets at Home, we'd be doing well. And next slide. So I then thought, well, I need a day job because these are all great fun, but I've got big school fees to pay. I've got two kids, a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. And so I went off and started working for some other brands. Yoke is a fashion silk pajama ladies brand. Troy London is a country kind of parka brand. And then I became COO of a brand called The Decree. So I was chief operating officer for 6 months. They were losing a lot of money. They just raised £1.5 million. They'd spent the whole lot in 3 months. It was gone. And they were basically looking at me white in the face going, what do we do next? So I turned up, we launched their website I had the meeting on the Friday. They had the Sunday Times article coming out on Sunday, and their website wasn't live. And I said to them, give me the website, let me get it live. And we got it live in 48 hours. And then they did £65,000 on their first day, which kind of blew them away. They paid for all of their costs and all of their revenue in the first thing. And so from that point forward, it was again taking a hatchet to everything they built up with all that money they'd spent, turning it around to profit. And by January, it's profitable 3 months later. And then I was gone by July, 6 months later, looking for the next opportunity. Chapter 5. And the next opportunity, I realized again, big school fees staring at me down like lamps down the road. I need to get back to the city. I needed to come back before I'd been out the market for too long. So I've been out the market for 6 years, and I kind of figured if I'd been out the insurance for more than 7, perhaps they'd think that I'd forgotten it all, which I nearly had. But I was very lucky. I landed a job at Apollo, which is a Lloyd's syndicate, pretty much putting my feet under the desk where I'd left off in 2013. It's a £550 million revenue business with 150 people. And I work for this chief underwriting officer and report into the executive for him. So I'm back in the city. I've got a stable salary. The sort of the ship has stopped wobbling. I can pay the school fees. And as a parent, there's something quite satisfactory about just knowing that you've got those kind of basics covered, the mortgage, the school fees, and that as an entrepreneur, it's not always guaranteed. Some months you might make lots, and some months you might have a disaster. But with COVID, clearly handbags fell off a cliff, and no one needs a handbag during lockdown because no one's out, right? So handbags went to zero last April, which has kind of led me to that feeling in July that a big shift had to happen, an adjustment. Next slide. So chapter 6, I think, is to follow, and I'll explain to you why. So my theory is that you ought to aim for 6 careers in your lifetime. And someone at Radley might tell me to be very quiet about now. But I think if you say that, you can commit 5 years to each chapter of your life, and you can then segment and slice your career into 6 opportunities and try and work out where you want to end up, and then slice your way backwards. You can actually go and do lots of different interesting things, but yet still go on the trajectory that you want to go on. So I don't think when you're sitting at Radley going, what do I want to be? If you think you want to be a partner in a law firm and that's the next 30 years, and that's great, but I wouldn't think of it that way. I would just think about, when I graduate, what I want to do the next 5 years, and just take it into much more bite-sized chunks. And then it's more manageable. You can get your head around a bit more and say, well, it was only 5 years of that, I can manage that. And I think perhaps the insurance for me now is only another 5 years and I'll go off and do something else again. So just by putting into these bite-sized chunks actually makes it a lot more easier to achieve and to manage, rather than being overwhelmed by this feeling of, oh my gosh, one career, one job, what am I going to do? Next slide. So really, yeah, it's 6 chapters in your life. Don't look at it, it's an evolution. It's always evolving, and the world is evolving very, very quickly around us. As you can see, everyone now is shutting all their retail stores. So in a funny way, we were very, very lucky that we shut them when we did. I think otherwise we'd be in the same position as people like Arcadia, who have gone into administration. All our businesses are e-commerce. There's one employee now who runs all the warehousing in the back end. And then my wife and I are the only other employees of these 4 businesses. And I have the day job in the city, which kind of gives me the base of which to look after my family, and gives me the stability to kind of learn onto the next thing. I'll stop there. Questions?
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, so everyone, please do feel free to put any questions for Doug onto the chat. I've got one for you. So after everything you've been through, and the things that you started recently and Melly Mellow, what do you, if you could condense it down to 1 or 3 things, what do you think the key things are, the key qualities are that you need to actually be an entrepreneur in the way that you are?
Good question. Yeah, I think for me the number 1 is never take no for an answer. So if the door gets slammed in your face, or if somebody's saying they can't do something, really go back at them again and find another angle and another way and get it done. And I think you can take that never take no for an answer for many, many things as an entrepreneur, and that never feeling of never giving up and having the passion to succeed. You have your good days and your bad days, but really looking beyond that and trying to see what's beyond the obstacle that's right in front of you is really important.
Thank you. I have another question around investment. I mean, you're saying that you don't necessarily need money to start a business, but how did you go about raising investment for Melly Mellow when you were trying to get that launched off the ground?
So we went round, I think, 25 firms on the first time when we're doing about $500,000 of turnover. In general, you won't get any investment below that kind of number. So if you're doing 150,000, you will get investment from friends and family, but you won't really get kind of professional investment beyond 500,000. And there's a huge gap in the market above 500,000 and up to sort of 2 or 3 million. There's not many people you can go to, but friends and family, people like myself, high net worths are the people who will put money behind you. There's a great scheme called EIS, and that makes it a very tax efficient investment. So I went to 5 people that I worked for in the city, and they all put in money into the business. And I also went to a venture capital firm who put money in as well. So I've done both, and friends and family is definitely the preferred option. My godfather put some money in, my uncle put a little bit in, some other people in the city did. So it's a real sort of mix and match. But the professional VC were the guys who really taught me, how to really shape the business and how to get it where it needs to be, where it needs to get to.
Thank you. I have a question on the chat. Apologies if you've answered elements of this. There's a few facets here. If you don't have startup capital, is a VC still bad? And did you raise the £150,000 through debt or equity? And have you heard of Founders Factory, and are they good?
Yeah. So we raised 150,000 as equity. My wife and I still hold today 85% of the business, and that was always our intention, to try and hold a big stake. Some of the other firms I touched on have sold much more than that and got less far, and so it really depends as to how much you want to sell and how much you want to hold on to. But even with that, try and work back as to what you want to end up with in terms of the piece of the pie, and then try and work back how much you're going to have to sell to get to that position. Because if you sell too much too quickly, you'll end up with not enough equity at the end of it. So I'm not saying VC capital. I'm saying the venture capital you get at around sort of 2-3 million level. That was quite a dirty dog fight that I met. I met 40 VCs along the way, and that was pretty aggressive venture capital. They were going to load up the business with a lot of debt. We could be fired as entrepreneurs. We could lose the whole business. So it was quite punchy, and that's why we got a bit uncomfortable as to whether we want to be partners with these people. But the early stage investor that we got wasn't like that. They were very fair, respected us as the founders. I think that's what you need to look for. Founders Factory, yep, I've come across them. Actually, my brother-in-law has just landed an investment from the Founders Factory into his app. So they're good. They got Brent Hoberman behind them. So yeah, great place to go. But yeah, high net worth angels, talk to people, and they will put you in touch. Someone like myself will be able to put you in touch with people. Other high net worths. Once you've got one, you can get another one, and it snowballs. But fundraising when you're pre-revenue is very difficult unless you've got a fantastic idea. So you have to get going, show some revenue ideally before you can get people behind it.
Brilliant, thank you. Another question on the chat. Do you think a further education in business is beneficial for a career as an entrepreneur?
The MBA I did gave me the thirst and the interest. I wasn't interested in being an entrepreneur before I did the MBA, and it really gave me the interest that I want to run my own business. So that really was the catalyst that made me think, I want to do this. And we get so many inspiring lectures from amazing professors during the MBA in America. It was amazing. And so, yeah, I think it's really beneficial to be an entrepreneur. Use the MBA.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got a question here about your current role. There's been a lot of scathing publicity about the culture that exists in the city. Is this your experience, or is it confined mainly to banking, in your opinion?
Mainly confined to banking, in my opinion. Insurance is a step down from banking. You're not going to earn as much, but you can still get there to that kind of level. But it's more gentleman's hours, I describe it as, rather than on the whole time. But banking is very, very intense. It's very, very competitive. But there are many other similar industries around that edge where you can play and still make the same kind of money. So I wouldn't just be fixated. If you want to make money, that banking, even though my 6-year-old has told me, Daddy, I want to be a banker. That's where he wants to go, because he thinks that the bankers are the ones that make the money. But just really try and experience it, try it out for yourself before jumping in and realizing you did the wrong decision.
Thank you. I've got a question here. What was your friend's company?
The one my brother-in-law.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
The app is called On the Life.
On the Life. Thank you. So another question from me here. What has been the impact of COVID on entrepreneurism generally, in your view? Positive, negative?
I think that there's a huge amount of businesses that are going to go to the wall over the next 9 to 12 months. We haven't seen the beginning of it. The government is propping up a lot of business through this furlough scheme, but there's still a lot of business already failing, and there's going to be a huge more that fail behind it. So yeah, it's going to be tough. But with these, then becomes opportunities. You can see opportunities to open up a new business, and then you got everyone failing around you, which then leads to another opportunity. So with every failure, there's also another opportunity, and something else will open up.
Absolutely, thank you. And another question of interest here. How many days, you seem to have a lot of fingers and a lot of pies, Doug. How many hours are you working a day at the moment?
So in insurance, I do 9 till 5. And then at home, I work from 8 until 11. And then I sort of tend to work weekends and that stuff. But that's because it's a passion and I love it. So it's not, my daughter came and sat next to me and said, "Gosh, Daddy, insurance looks a bit dull," she said to me. And I said, "Well, it is dull, but it pays the bills and it's done in a interesting way." And so really trying to understand and find the balance. And even she, as a 9-year-old, she said to me, "Well, Daddy, why don't you find a job that you love?" I said, "Well, doing Melly Mellow and becoming an entrepreneur is something that I love, because whatever you put in, you get straight back out. But the world changes very quickly around you, and you've got to be very agile and really think ahead as to how you shift and you shape your business as the world around you evolves."
Thank you. And another question via the chat here, again about the city. Are jobs in the city at risk in the future, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think they are. I know that our company hasn't furloughed anybody during this time, and we're having a boom 4 or 5 years ahead of us. In the whole insurance sector is having a boom moment because it's counter-cyclical. I think there are many other jobs that will be at risk. A lot of my banking friends have lost their jobs, a huge amount over the last 9 months. So there are segments which are booming and segments which are failing, and you need to kind of look as to which segment you think is going to be doing what by the time you graduate or by the time you look for your role. Not easy.
No, not at all.
But I think for me, work experience is everything. So really, like, I try to pick it up a little bit. If you can just talk to your mums and dad and say, "Look, do you know anyone in insurance? Do you know anyone in horse racing? Do you know anyone in hotels?" Whatever it might be you want to try out, go and try it, and just do 3 weeks and try it out. And then you can say, "That wasn't for me." So then you've tried it, wasn't for you. And then you can move on, and it looks good on your CV. You might get paid a bit of money for trying it out, and then you can move on and try something else.
Thank you. Building on that point, have you found that you've used and created quite a strong network on your journeys?
I haven't probably done it enough. I think you get so focused on what you're doing. I used to, on the way up, I used to do a lot of travel, a lot of networking, and then I realized actually that this is something that can fall away. And if you focus down when you're trying to do so many things, you can really bring it back to what makes things work and what makes profit. I did a lot of meetings with investors, a lot of pitching, and actually, once you take that away and that stress of we've got to fundraise, suddenly all your time comes back. So you can get a bit preoccupied about, oh, we need to fundraise, we need to find the next million, rather than thinking about how do I make this business profitable, or what needs to change given what's happening out there.
Thank you. Another question regarding the insurance industry on the chat here. Would you say the insurance industry has profited from behind force majeure? I do not know how to pronounce that.
No. So, I mean, the insurance industry is paying out billions of dollars of COVID claims. I think some of the insurance companies haven't acted very fairly with the county court judgment, or the high court judgments ruled against them now, so that those claims will get paid. So, I think, but there's been, last year we had over 20 named storms, hurricanes, huge numbers of billions of dollars of insurance payout last year. So what's happening, there's been so many claims last year, so many business interruption claims from COVID, so many hurricanes from natural catastrophes from global warming, that actually the prices are going up very, very quickly, which means that over the long term, insurance companies are in a very good position. But that's because they've been paying out a huge number of claims in the last 2 or 3 years, that the prices are going up so quickly.
Thank you. And a Radley question here. So if you had your time again, and you were back at Radley, what would you do differently now with the benefit of hindsight?
Good question. I went to Horace Hill where they didn't play rugby. I wish my dad had sent me to school where I played rugby. That was a big, tough change to go from football to rugby school. I think I would try and enjoy myself more. I think I took it quite seriously, Radley. It's a big school. It's got some great things happening. This entrepreneur club as well, I'd be more into that. I would do even more work experience than I probably did. I did 3 internships. I'll probably try and do more than that. Definitely take a gap year. And I would try and time my graduation with the time that the job market gets a little bit better, which it isn't next year. So just try and postpone. If you're coming out of Radley and you're not going to university, you're looking for a job in 2021 or 2022, it's going to be tough to try and already think about pushing out and pushing back, and giving yourself time There's nothing worse than that pressure of, I've got to get a job, rather than actually thinking, I'm going to put some other plans in place first.
Thank you. Final question from me. So if anybody here is thinking of starting their own business, what would be the most important piece of advice that you'd like to leave them with?
Start it. Don't talk about it, but start it. Turn it on. Try it out. Try and make some money. See how long it takes you to make any money. Try and make your first customer, your first sale, and just keep learning from what you do and make the mistakes and try and keep building on it. But don't rush for investment. Really focus on making the business the two things I told you about: margin and about profit. And if you do those two things, everything else will take care of itself. And don't think like I thought, that if you hire lots of people, it will generate a lot more revenue. It won't. And also taking the investor money won't necessarily bring you more revenue. So there's a lot of winds blowing you in different directions. So really try and stick to the business and focus, keep your focus on one thing whilst you're growing that. Once it's successful, you can move on to the next thing. But stay focused until something works, and then you can let go of it and try the next thing. And then it gets quite addictive, as you can see from what I'm doing. But happy to help anyone. Anyone's got any questions? I'm happy to give out my email. I'm always happy to act as an advisor or consultant, whatever works for people over time, and build up a relationship. And as you start a business, you can start as a friendly face to answer a few questions you might have. And as the business grows and stuff, I can help introduce you to my network and put you in a place where things can go further.
Brilliant. Thank you, Doug. That was a really fantastic insight into the world of entrepreneurism. Thanks for taking the time out of your very busy life to come and talk to us. We've learned a lot and we're really grateful. So thank you. Now, before we all go, I'm going to tell you about the next exciting career talk that we have coming up this Friday. We've got Hannah Bauer, Global Leadership Development Lead at Vodafone and graduate recruitment expert, who's going to talk to you about the value of pursuing multiple careers, a point that Doug raised, multiple careers in your lifetime. Hannah is a fantastic speaker who's an expert at giving career advice at a really senior level in organisations, so I'd urge you to join us for this one. Thanks for attending the event, and we look forward to seeing you at some of our future talks. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Doug.
Good luck.